I was born in October 1929 in Regensburg, Germany. Well, it's all about anywhere from 60, 70 miles north of Munich. It's right on the Danube River. She raised me till she married someone else, and he was a barber. She was an excellent seamstress. She made a living on it. She would go to someone's house who made a dress for her. At that time, they didn't have the stores like they have today with all the dresses. But she would make, in the day, she would make a dress for someone. We didn't have kindergarten, just 1 through 8. My mother decided to move to Munich when I was about 5 years old, or almost 6, because I started school in Munich, Germany. Matter of fact, we still have most of the people are Catholic in Bavaria, and they had a priest come once a week and taught to get the gospel.
So you were Catholic?
Yeah. It was kind of mandatory to be part of the Hitler Youth Group. So they started, I think, when you were 8 years old. We had all those bomb raids 7 nights a week. So they sent the whole class, including the teacher, out in the country. Somewhere, some mansion house we used to live, or right on the best part was right on the Austrian border, which wasn't close to the border. There wasn't a border anymore. We had very little to do with schools. We had like an organization with troops, with whole companies. You belong to a certain group.
Did they teach you scouting type things?
Yeah, pretty much. I enjoyed it because you got together with your schoolmates, your friends, and we went out in the country. In the winter we skied, in the summer we were out in the country, and wherever we were. And there were a lot of emphasis on sports. You have uniform, you have brown shirts, right, and a tie and black pants. Up to the 14, you were in the youth group, and then you were in the Hitler Youth Group, the older ones, up to 18.
How much did you know about that, being still in the early youth group there?
Well, it's probably surprising. There was also a group for adults. He joined the party, and none of my family, anyone I knew or were a part of the party. As soon as we had free time, we played cowboy and Indians. There's a famous author in Germany, Karl May, and he wrote books about the West. And we read this, and we imitated to be like Indians or trappers and hunters. Yeah.
At some point, did they have a ceremony when you went and joined at age 14 the Hitler Youth? Was there a swearing-in ceremony?
Oh, do you have to swear to support Hitler?
Did your mother talk about this at all? Was she encouraging or discouraging?
She just, most people were just kind of neutral, going along, and a lot of marching. We participated in May Day parade. Right. I remember very distinctly. We carried the whole school kid, a big flower, a paper flower. It's a huge on a stick.
Right.
And we watched. I was fortunate to be right on the right side. There were 10 deep probably. And Hitler was standing right there. And I turned my head and looked at Hitler. But I'm now distinctly talking about boxing there. I mean, when Joey Louis boxed Schmeling, they thought he knocked Joe Louis out the first time.
Right.
And the second time he knocked him out, Joe Louis sucked. That was a really, everyone was on the radio listening to it at 4 o'clock in the morning. And well, we had some leaders. We had set up like a company. We had a company commander, groups commanders, down to, I was a kind of squad leader.
How many people would be in your squad?
Oh, probably 5, 6, 7.
In your training, did you ever get to the point of taking up arms and going to the range and shooting? And
they asked me to join this group to learn how to use the German rifle. Well, I wasn't old enough to be drafted.
Right.
So we were in Dachau. Dachau is a town on top of the hill. The concentration camp was down in the valley. The train went right through there, and you could see the concentration camp. And people were not talking out loud, they were whispering to friends. They're burning people down there. You could see the smoke at the chimney back there. So, and later on when we were traveling around, Kathy and I, we stopped there and visited some of the places I used to work, and also went to Dachau to really walk through. It's like a museum.
On that subject, when you walked through and walk the internal part of the Dachau concentration camp, what was your emotion? Here you were physically there in 1945. You could see it. You may not have known what was actually going on other than people whispering. What was your emotion? What did you feel?
Well, I was almost wondering, it doesn't make, what's wrong with the Jews? Although we had some Jewish friends, and we know some Jews. You see him walking around with the Jew, the star with this said Jew on it. Yeah, it was terrible walking through there and see the way they were treated and how they lived in the concentration camp. Yeah, maybe they had a paper coming out, how bad the Jews are, what they did to Germany and so on. But I remember distinctly when they, on this particular day, the party members they went and broke the Jewish stores, the windows.
Crystal knocked.
Yeah. And my mother said, we know what they did. They broke all the Jews. Some of our, we shopped there, we've been there before. And so we then looked at it, but you couldn't see anything except broken windows.
Any of your friends in school, were they Jewish?
We didn't have any Jews.
Jews in your schools?
No, they were separate.
Separate, yeah.
They had their own schools. And there was the saying, you act like the Jews. You act like the Jewish camp, Jewish school. When you made too much noise, because they were very, very noisy when they had, during the break, when they were allowed to run around in the backyard there. And they were very noisy, and it's funny, it's all over Germany that they act like the Jews.
So it's sort of derogatory.
Yeah.
Did you know that it was how the war was going?
Well, it was on the radio and in the paper, and yeah, I remember distinctly when Hitler spoke one time, and everyone was on. They had those cheap radios. Everyone could afford one, you know. And he was speaking. You could hear him, and I noticed there wasn't a car or a truck or a person walking. Everyone was on the radio and listened what Hitler had to say.
Diese Wiederherstellung der Ehre unseres Volkes ihren äußerlich sichtbarsten Ausdruck fand in der Einführung der Wehrpflicht.
We were brought up like this, so we believed in Hitler, but I don't think we really inspired.
We are interrupting our programs to bring you a news flash.
This is London calling. Here is a news flash. The German radio has just announced that Hitler is dead. I repeat that. The German radio has just announced that Hitler is dead.
I don't remember how. Of course, at that time, everything was in a kind of end of the war. There wasn't much, you know, Germany was pretty much destroyed. So I don't even know if there was a paper, but the word got around. Did the best we could to get by, you know, on the food, the rations you were able to get. But one thing, on my mother's side, she came from a family of 12 kids, and 2 of them went to the United States in the 1920s. And as a matter of fact, they did send us a package one time with some clothes and some we needed.
So what did you and your mother do? Did you stay there?
Yeah, we stayed where well, I was working on this farm. I was going to start an agriculture school for 2 years. So I did that, and then we had our friends. We used to go skiing the Alps, you know. You hop on the train, and the train didn't run on time as usually, not on time at that time, and so we had to really get to the mountain where we wanted to go, walk quite a bit.
Nuremberg trials started, and Robert Jackson from Spring Creek, Pennsylvania, right down the road here. Were you aware of what was being done to the leaders of the German government?
Oh yeah, we watched this very closely on radio and on paper. But we were all glad it was over. We had enough war being bombed and not have probably enough food to, We lived in this apartment house, had 4 stories, and we had a small apartment there, my mother and my stepfather there. At first there were a few bombs there, and we were just boys there, and we saw and watched it and say, hey, we ought to have some more bombing to see some excitement, you know. We didn't say this again because we really got hit hard, and we're glad we all survived. You know.
Yeah. What did your stepfather do for a living?
He was a barber.
Barber?
He worked in one of the salons in a nice best district of Munich, of course. He was drafted, you know. He was in the 40s and 50s, you know, and he was drafted.
Was he?
But just around he wore the uniform, and but not shooting a gun. Just I'm not sure what he did.
And lights out, where you had to turn out all the lights at night, and
Oh yeah, because of the bombing. Yeah. Yeah, everything was dark after after a certain time. You know, yeah. Oh, they find you if they showed the window not covered. Matter of fact, we some friends and we played in the backyard, and I hurt myself. I got a big wound right here, and so my parents weren't home yet when this happened. I went to the neighbors, and she banded it up and said, go down and see the doctor. We had the doctor just around the street, a few houses, you know, and he could go anytime he needed help. And he looked at it and bandaged it up again and said, you go to the hospital, have your mother, your dad take you to the hospital. So we went to the streetcar. They had to be covered, the windows, you know. He had a curtain first to get in, and then you got to close the curtain, and then so no light would show ever. So my mother took me there. They had no pain medication. I was screaming for every stitch. You can see the stitches. And first they cleaned it out with iodine, and it's really painful. I screamed. The whole hospital must have heard me. But they held me down, and then they put some cardboard in there so I couldn't bend my knee. But I went to school the next day.
did you see the SS, the black shirts, and were they all present?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they were sharp looking. But I did see Hitler. I remember one time Hitler, the Italian leader, Mussolini, and Chamberlain, and the French minister, whatever.
Yep.
They were driving by, and people were cheering at that time, and it was hard to get there. So I climbed up a fence to see him. So I saw all those four guys at the time sitting in a car, an open car, and people were clapping.
Well, that was the Munich conference. Wow.
Yeah.
By the way, that's pretty nifty that your husband was an eyewitness to that historical event. To me, that's pretty amazing.
You know, he brought up like this in the Hitler Youth Group, and I have pictures of it too. And I was kind of a leader, just a squad leader or a troop leader, you know. And but we just did what we had to do and enjoyed, had a good time. And you got to support your got to support your leaders. Even though we did in the way we believed in Hitler, growing up, that's all he knew about. But there were some I had to, as a troop leader or whatever I'd call it at the time, I had to let them know we're going to meet at a certain time. I came to the door and knocked. She would never, to close the door. She would never talk to me. She was against all the Hitlerjugend group. The boys I had under me, I need to let them know that we meet a certain time. So we didn't have phones at the time. You had to go to the house and talk to them. And some were kind of, you could see they were kind of against all this.
Did you come to the United States?
In 1952, my uncle sponsored me. I still have the paperwork, what he had to do in order to sponsor me so he can support me, to show the property, how much money he made and everything. So, well, he picked me up at the door. I came out on a big ship with several thousand immigrants, different French, German, and when we arrived, he picked me up, and the next day he took me to Channel. Well, they gave me 1 day off, I should say that. But then he took me to the biggest hospital in the world, at the New York Medical Center. When I get a job, my first job, and they put me with a 6-foot black guy. But in Germany you didn't have any black people except some GIs, and so we mopped floors, he and I. So, but he was a good guy. We had a good time, and we just did what we had to do and mopped the floors for 3 days. And then they asked me if I could run the little lab there, which they had this huge boilers. I remember 4 boilers for the entire building there. They had to check the water and some chemicals. Had to add some chemicals and had to be a certain level. And throughout the building, it was a good job, but you only paid $1 an hour at the time. And your taxes were maybe $1 or $2. So I was looking for another job, and I found one to be a coppersmith helper. That was interesting work. I enjoyed that, but they wanted me to be to learn the trade there. But I decided I'd join. I wanted to be an American, not an immigrant. And so I joined the army. And after 2 years, I became an American citizen.
Thank you. You've been so gracious.
You're welcome.